So moving on to our next topic, we have the NFC West, our last division we're going to look at in our NFL preview. So the teams in this division, we have the Cardinals, Rams, 49ers, Seahawks. So you want to give us the background, a preview of this division?
Yeah, so 3 out of 4 of these teams in 2019 were 8-8 or better, or 9-7 in better or better, I should say. I mean, you had the 49ers go 13-3, the Seahawks go 11-5, then you have the Rams go 9-7. So looking at this division going into 2020, this division got even better with teams like the Cardinals at the bottom having just an absolutely huge offseason. So in my opinion, this is just the most competitive division in all football, and it's led by the NFC champs, San Francisco 49ers. So again, they just lost the Super Bowl to the Chiefs. We kind of talked about them in a short video me and Sam just made, but they did have a really great offseason. Now, I know news just kind of came out about Raheem Morrister requesting a trade. They kind of have a loaded backfield, so he's not going to get the contract he wants or the touches he wants. But again, they re-signed some key players like Kendrick Bourne, Matt Breida, Eric Armstead, Jason Verrett, Jimmy Ward. I mean, they brought in a wide receiver in Travis Benjamin because they did end up losing Emmanuel Sanders. They did trade DeForest Buckner and his huge contract, but then they ended up drafting Javon Kinlaw and Brandon Ayuk. So even another replacement for Emmanuel Sanders outside of Travis Benjamin. So, I mean, they did really have a great offseason. They're going to be looking very strong with Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo coming off of his first season playing a full 16 games, which I think is something to note as well. So it's going to be really interesting seeing what they can do week one going into that week one matchup against the Arizona Cardinals.
I think the 49ers are kind of the team to beat in this division again. I think they're going to be very good for the foreseeable future. We both think John Lynch is an excellent general manager, and he's constantly making moves to make his team better and make his team the front runner in this division. But yeah, I just like they traded Matt Breida. They traded, or I don't know if they're going to trade Mostert. I just think he just wants more money. If they give him money, he might stay. But I mean, they still have Tevin Coleman, who is a solid running back. So if they lose those running backs, they have Tevin Coleman, then they definitely have someone else in the woodworks that would step up because John Lynch is great at finding talent. So I think that's not going to be much of an issue. But I just like the moves that they're constantly making. They're
Yeah,
constantly getting better, making changes, getting younger, getting faster, less money being used. Like DeForest Buckner had a huge contract. They signed and traded him to the Colts and immediately got Javon Kinlaw, who was all pro potential, which Buckner wasn't all pro. So they got that back, honestly. So I'll see. I think the 49ers will repeat as division champs.
yeah, and now I would be careful with the 49ers just a little bit. We just saw the Rams kind of have a Super Bowl hangover when they ended up losing to the Patriots. So now you have the 49ers, of course, coming off of a loss to the Chiefs. I think this team does have a potential of a Super Bowl hangover. I do think this team is going to have Jimmy Garoppolo really take a step up and be a solidified top 15 quarterback in the NFL right now because I think he's hovering around that 15 to kind of 22 spot in terms of starting quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion. So I do think this team is going to have to get better and more consistent in the passing game because when you look at the NFL, the two least consistent things that carry over from season to season are number one, defense, and number two, running game. And that is the two things that this team was so reliant on in 2019, 2020. So I do see a bit of a potential for a Super Bowl hangover for this team because again, they're so reliant on that run game. They're so reliant on that great defense, but they didn't really lose anyone on the defense to suggest that they're going to take a major step back. And they didn't really lose anybody on the offensive end as well to suggest a major step back. So again, I do expect this team to be division champs. I think they're going to be better than the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Arizona Cardinals. But again, I would not be surprised to see this team finish 9-7 like the Rams did this past season.
So moving on to the next team, I think in the second place spot for this division, I think it will be the Seahawks, and I can see the Seahawks fighting for first place because I mean they fought for first place till the end last year with that last play in Seattle against the 49ers when they got stopped at the 1 or 2 yard line. But
Yeah.
the Seahawks, I mean, they're looking at their draft. I mean, they drafted Jordan Brooks, who is a fast linebacker. And I mean, he's a little undersized. We're not too high on him. He could be a good, fast kind of hybrid type running or linebacker. But
Yeah.
free agency, they signed Greg Olsen, re-signed Bruce Irvin, returning him back to Seattle. They got Quentin Dunbar, who we don't know if he's even going to be able to play with his jail time, and I don't know with all of that. They got Carlos Hyde. They signed a couple offensive linemen to help Russell Wilson, who is constantly running for his life and scrambling for extra time. And then they got Philip Dorsett. So they obviously are trying to help their defense, help their offensive line, and add some weapons around Russell Wilson. But I think obviously the story is their success always is going to fall on the back of Russell Wilson. Last year they made it to the playoffs. They made it to the second round, and it was all on the shoulders of Russell Wilson. He didn't have that much help around him. I mean, the only notable weapons he had was Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, really, and he was still able to will them to the playoffs. So the success is just always on his shoulders.
Yeah, I'm just really not in love with the Seattle Seahawks offseason this season. Now, I do think DK Metcalf could take quite a jump and be really a bona fide number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. And I think he can be a very good player for the Seattle Seahawks, less of a limited player than he was last season. But again, I really don't like their offseason because their most just notable free agent was Jadeveon Clowney, and they ended up kind of letting him be a free agent. I still do think he's going to be a Seattle Seahawk going into 2020. But with that being said, he's not on the roster right now. But again, you said they had some adds like Bruce Irvin. They did add Philip Dorsett, which in my opinion, outside of his speed, which he does have game-breaking speed, I think he's one of the worst wide receivers in the entire National Football League. If you wanted to watch the New England Patriots play last season, it was very apparent that there was no wide receiver who was off page so often with Tom Brady. Then Philip Dorsett just really struggled in that Patriots offense, kind of finding just open seams in the defense, which is just so key for the Patriots offense to kind of revolve around that intermediate to short passing game. But kind of going off that point, I do think the Seattle Seahawks are a Russell Wilson injury from being the worst team in the NFL, quite frankly, or one of the worst teams in the NFL. Just a very depleted roster, just not a good team around Russell Wilson. And again, we see that current theme carrying into this offseason and carrying into next offseason, and it really hurts them every single playoff run because I think since they lost to the Patriots, they've been playoff contenders, but they have not been Super Bowl contenders. And that's how I see the Seattle Seahawks going into 2020. I think they're going to be playoff contenders. I think they're going to hover around 10 wins this season. But again, you had a team in the Arizona Cardinals come into Seattle and beat you. So that's not good looking into next season. And just looking at this team's playoff woes the last couple of seasons, they always struggle, win or loss. And just going into kind of the playoffs last season, they really struggled against the Eagles, struggled to pull away against just a Eagles team that limped to the playoffs. You even had Carson Wentz go down with an injury in that game, barely escape from Philadelphia with that win. You go into Lambeau, you play a 13-3 team, really, really tough. I will give them that, but again, I don't think you were too high on the Packers team last year. I know the media wasn't. I really wasn't either. I think that was a very weak one-seeded Packers team. So Seattle really struggled in that Packers game. The Packers really struggled in that. I think it was just who would struggle less. So the Packers did end up winning that game, kind of getting blown out against the 49ers the following week. But again, I just see Seattle being stagnant this offseason. I think they will be playoff contenders, but not Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, their off-season with the draft, I think they always try to get that sneaky player. You saw it with Jordan Brooks, but in hindsight, who knows if it's going to really help their team if he's going to be able to be that great of an NFL player. I think they really need to have more successful off-seasons for them to be back into the Super Bowl contention.
Yeah, and they're really a team where the last 10 to 15 years, the Seattle Seahawks have had such a great track record at the 2nd through 7th round of the NFL draft, picking up some great players. I mean, you look at that entire Legion of Boom, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, just all these guys. None of these guys were first-round picks, but with the Seattle Seahawks, I mean, even DK Metcalf was second round pick. But with the Seattle Seahawks, they've really been so shaky with their first round picks. I think the last decade or so. So even Russell Wilson was, I believe, a third round pick out of Wisconsin. But again, I'm really not in love with the Seattle Seahawks first round track record. And I think they continue that trend this year. I really don't like the linebacker they ended up picking, but we'll see if he's kind of a piece to this puzzle for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I mean, trying to get back into their defensive ways of past when they were the Legion of Boom is what it looks like. But moving on to the next team, the Arizona Cardinals, I think will finish third in this division, maybe even second if they do make that jump. I think they're one season away from making that jump. I think not this year, next year they'll be kind of the contender to make the playoffs and win this division, take this division away from the 49ers. But I like their draft. We were both in love with Isaiah Simmons. I mean, he's just an exceptional generational talent on defense. But I think what the Cardinals need to do with him, I think we both agree that he needs to kind of be a freelance and do what he wants on defense. They can't really stick him in one spot on the defensive side of the ball because that will kind of hurt his growth and hurt just the player who he is, and that is playing every position. If they just put him at linebacker, that's going to take some of the kind of the characteristics and skill away from him. And then also notably trading David Johnson, some other players for Nuke, DeAndre Hopkins, adding a massive weapon to their wide receiver core with Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, our boy Andy Isabella to help a young Kyler Murray. But this is Cliff Kingsbury's second season, and I'm excited to see what he can kind of more implement the air raid offense even more into the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, along with the Denver Broncos, there's no team as overhyped going into next season than the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, and this hype is warranted in my opinion because they had an absolutely phenomenal offseason. I mean, they had so much holes on that defense last season. They had some good players on the defensive end. Obviously, one of the best edge rushers in the entire NFL in Chandler Jones. But again, they signed Jordan Phillips from the Buffalo Bills. They signed Devon Kennard, who he was a New York Giant for a while. He played a season with the Lions. He played very good last season. They signed DeAndre Campbell from the Falcons. And, of course, drafting Isaiah Simmons, like you said, that's really going to bolster that defense to the point where I do think they have the defensive personnel to be pretty good. They signed a cornerback. I believe his name is Ronald Alford. I know his last name is Alford. He's a good third string cornerback too. So, I mean, they did really bolster that defense. Of course, they had a really good draft in drafting, again, like we said, Isaiah Simmons. They drafted in the third round Josh Jones, who was kind of a consensus fringe first round talent coming out of Houston. So he's going to be able to step into that right tackle position, I believe, and start not right away, but at some point in the season. So that's going to be huge. They did end up losing their center, A.Q. Shipley, who I know Kyler Murray loved, and I really liked that center position. I thought he was a very solid center. I think he played for the Colts for quite an amount of time, too. I think he was a backup for the Colts at some point. But, again, they're going to move forward in the year with Kenyon Drake at running back, losing David Johnson to a trade, but he was really just washed last season, really lost a couple steps to his game. Just wasn't an explosive player. He was still a good receiver out of the backfield, but that's about it. He's going to kind of contribute something for the Texans, but not really starting caliber running back play, in my opinion. But again, I think this team, it's really shaky with the Cardinals because I think they're going to perform very, very, very well out of their division. I didn't state who they're going to play yet, the NFC West. Going into the teams they're going to play the NFC East, led by the Giants, the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Redskins, of course. Then they're going to play the AFC West, so the Jets and teams of that nature, the Dolphins, the Bills. So again, I think each and every single one of these teams in this division is going to play very, very well out of conference, out of division. So that's really not the problem with the Arizona Cardinals. I think the problem with the Arizona Cardinals is going to be in division play because, again, they did lose both games to the 49ers last season, played very well against them, but did lose both of those games. They did go 1-1 versus Seattle, winning a very impressive game up in Seattle, which I think that will carry over in the next season. But the biggest question mark, or the second biggest question mark for me with the Arizona Cardinals. I'll get into the first in a minute, but is going to be the Los Angeles Rams because they got absolutely blown out 2 times in a row against the Rams. So if they lose both games against the Rams next season, they're going to finish fourth in this division. I really don't see any way around that. So I do think the Arizona Cardinals are going to have a lot of tough sledding going into the 2020 season. I do expect them to be the third or even second seed. I think they do have the potential to be better than Seattle. They do have the potential to be better than the Los Angeles Rams, but right now I view them as kind of the fourth seed looking up.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think looking at their schedule, I think if they lose a lot of games, I think they'll be kind of one-score games. I don't think they're going to get blown out of much games. I think they're going to be very competitive in all the games they play, but I think it's just about growing pains with building their relationship with DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler Murray, Cliff Kingsbury. I think it's going to be I can see them finishing second, but I think they're going to finish third. I'm pretty confident in that. But I'm excited to see them in 2 years where they can definitely kind of fight for the top of this division because they do have so much talent. They do have so much young talent. It's not like they're made up of a bunch of veterans. They do have young talent around them. But yeah, I mean, going into the next team, or did you have something you want to say about the Cardinals or?
Yeah, kind of my biggest concern with the Arizona Cardinals is going to be their defensive coordinator, Vance Joseph. Really watching them last season, watching the Broncos, led by head coach at the time, Vance Joseph. I really do think he was so mismanaging some of his talent, like Bradley Chubb, Von Miller. I know they went like the first 6 weeks without a sack between those two deadly edge rushing pairs. So that really shows how incompetent Vance Joseph is in terms of schematic, just defensive coordinator, being good, having your team play as a unit. So I do think if there is one downfall for the Arizona Cardinals, it is going to be Vance Joseph and it is going to be this defense led by Vance Joseph. So this Arizona Cardinals team, they're going to have to play very, very well on the offensive end to warrant a playoff conversation.
Yeah, hopefully they're in the market for a defensive coordinator after this season, or even in the middle of this season.
Certainly.
But moving on to the Los Angeles Rams, I absolutely love the Rams draft. Honestly, I mean they drafted Cam Akers, who I think is a very underrated running back coming into the draft. He is very, very shifty, very fast, very powerful, and obviously the big news is the Rams losing Todd Gurley, but Todd Gurley having some knee troubles and questions around Todd Gurley's relationship with Sean McVay, but drafting Cam Akers and then in the running back room with Darrell Henderson is the other running back's name, if I'm not mistaken. That could be a great 1-2 punch coming out of the backfield because so much on the burden was on Todd Gurley's back for their offense, and that kind of ran him to the ground because they didn't really have a second option until they got C.J. Anderson later on in their Super Bowl run. But with Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, that can really help Jared Goff take some of the burden off his shoulders. And obviously drafting Van Jefferson, who adds a lot of depth at the wide receiver position, and he's a very good route runner coming out of Florida. And then for a lot of the other draft picks in this draft, they drafted someone like Terrell Lewis, Jordan Fuller, adding a lot of depth on the defensive side because they did lose quite a bit of defensive press in Monte Fowler, Corey Littleton, Eric Weddle retired. So they lost some players in the draft, in free agency, but they did kind of try to refill those holes with the draft.
Yeah, they did add Leonard Floyd. I mean, you hit it on top of the head. I know they did trade for Jalen Ramsey kind of midway through the season. Lost their first round pick because of that, but I mean, the draft, again, Cam Akers out of Florida State in the second round. I know you really like him. I really like him too. I think they had, honestly, a phenomenal draft in considering they didn't have a first round pick. So that's really good for the Rams. I'd be careful of writing off the Rams just yet. I think everyone's pegging them as the fourth team in this division. But again, they went better than 500 last season. I mean, this is a team where I think they'll be fine running the ball with Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers. I think he'll be worked into the offense more and more each and every week. But again, I think their problem does lie with Jared Goff, kind of this offensive line, and more specifically their defense. I think the last season they really just played really just as a disoriented unit. They didn't play as a collective unit for that defensive end, just that defensive spot in general. So I do think the Rams do have a question mark at that defense, and again, do have a question mark with that offense. Sean McVay kind of got exposed a little bit because I think NFL defenses kind of caught on to what he was kind of trying to do with Sean or trying to do with Jared Goff in the fact that manufacturing catches, manufacturing plays, kind of these one read plays where if you take away Jared Goff's first read, he's really a below average quarterback. So I think Jared Goff did get exposed in that a little bit last year, had an up and down season. So I do think the Rams coming into 2020, you still have to respect them. You still have to say they are the third best team in this division just because they are coming off of 2 seasons ago being the NFC champions, having a 9-7 record, barely missing the playoffs. So with this new playoff formation, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see them end up making the playoffs, but I do expect for this Arizona Cardinals team to take a step up, and I do expect for the Arizona Cardinals to be better than the Los Angeles Rams in 2020.
Yeah, I think their success kind of lies in Jared Goff, like you said, and he needs to make a lot of progress in the. I don't know what's going to be the kind of the training camp in NFL this summer in early August, but he needs to make a lot of steps forward in the potential training camp to be able to for the Rams to be able to be successful on offense. I mean, you saw the numbers he was putting up when they did make the Super Bowl and they were making those playoff runs, but that was, like you said, a lot of just one read plays just manufactured by Sean McVay before the snap. I know a lot of reports saying that Sean McVay was making a lot of the audibles before the play was even when he had the microphone in Jared Goff's head. So who knows what's going to happen to the Rams? I think looking at this division, it's going to be the most competitive division in all of football.
Yeah.
I think just all teams are very, very good. And if they're, say, like the Rams are in the NFC East, I think they would be able to win the NFC East probably.
Yeah.
Just shows how good the competition is in this division. So, I mean, we think the 49ers are going to win. We think it's going to be 49ers, Seahawks, Cardinals, Rams. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's kind of a lot of fluctuation in who comes out on top and who comes out on bottom.
I completely agree. So again, looking at the teams these teams are playing, I think it's a shoo-in for almost every, if not every single team in the NFC West to beat teams like the Giants, to beat teams like the Redskins, even split against the Cowboys and Eagles if they could each team go 1-1 against those teams. I mean, I think each and every team is better than the Jets, better than the Dolphins, better than the Patriots, even could give the Bills the run for their money. So again, the in-conference games are going to be so vitally important for each and every single one of these teams. And that's going to be the pecking order for this division with just who is going to come out on top in these divisional games. Whoever has the best divisional record is going to win the division and so on and so forth. So for this season, I'm very nervous about the Seattle Seahawks just because I think, again, they are a Russell Wilson injury away from being a bottom 5 team in the entire National Football League. And I kind of have a weird feeling that is going to happen in 2020. But besides that, if that doesn't happen, I do see the 49ers being the best team in the division. I do see the Seahawks being a second, but kind of a closer second to third and fourth than a closer second to number 1, in my opinion. I do think the Rams are going to finish third in this division, and I do think the Cardinals are going to finish fourth.